Well, Vivian, like all the talk that we've had so far about the data has been like talking about it in terms of like we'll call it the rear view mirror, right? But data also has the ability to be predictive, a front windshield. So are there any sort of opportunities with using data in a predictive way that are getting missed or that just aren't available yet but will be?
Man, I can't, there's so much of this I can't talk about. um, so, yeah, I mean, short answer, yeah, like we're definitely, I mean, there are definitely efforts being made to do cool things, machine learning, neural network models to predict a variety of KPIs, right? So like streaming, I would imagine Spotify would probably be working on that. Yeah, a number of things that, yes, they are. And I think a really cool resource for those people that are interested in that is Kaggle, Kaggle. They have data sets there for you to pull and places. There's even like step-by-step guides on how you would start building something like that. I suggest to my students data camp as well. Data camp, like machine learning in R, is something that can definitely do. And there's just not enough people in the space that are interested in doing that. And also these people are very expensive and only the biggest companies can afford someone to do those types of things. I always tell my students, I always poke them for their final project. They have to like come up with a problem in the music industry and solve it with technology. So I always tell them that there's such a gap here. If you wanted to start a company that could ingest different sets of data, create connections so you can contextualize, like there's an appetite out there if someone wanted to start that company, like happy to consult.
Well, Bill, how do you utilize data during a release rollout in order to iterate your marketing so you have that like Brian mentioned, the first week, the first few weeks, boom. Is that something that you're able to do, or when you have a release rollout designed, it's written in stone and you're not gonna sway from it?
No, and honestly, it's not. It shouldn't be as difficult as it really is to parse together all the numbers, particularly U.S. versus global data. I know that's one of the biggest things a lot of us are kind of put our hands up over. It's like, okay, we got all this data, but this was just North America. But the band has toured Europe for 10 years, and they've done X in Germany and X in France. Like, how does that correlate into one big picture, right? Like that should be way easier than it is. But as far as parsing the data during a rollout, me personally, I've taken it from a week by week lead up campaign with a goal by goal kind of strategy. Whereas like, all right, for the next 10 days we're going to do this and do it this way based on the past data that we've got gathered from the previous campaign, and then see where we're at. And then what Ryan alluded to early in the call is, okay, let's keep doing what worked and stop immediately what isn't working. And that's kind of the whole point of all this, right? Is to parse out the data and take what's working and leave what isn't. As far as what Downey was saying about tools, like tools are great, and tools will get you. It's like tools anywhere else. Like a good table saw will work better than a crappy one, but it's the archer and not the arrow. And what you do with that data and what you do from with those tools is really what matters. But the thing is too is like for people like us, we all talk about gatekeepers and high barriers to entry as far as cost, which is true. But on the flip side of that, if you're a young emerging artist with no manager like Mike or Ryan or Randy, and you're doing it by yourself, there's more now than there ever has been to get your hands on and dig into multiple sets of data that guys like us when we're all in bands never could have dreamed of. Especially through the platforms themselves. Like I know like the Twitter analytics on their own is pretty damn good from my experience. And yeah, you can spend money on a tool that digs deeper, like like CrowdTangle or Sprout Social or Buffer or something. All great tools, but the stuff that's cost free is still there for young artists to grab.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's where I wanted to go next. I mean, a number of us are former musicians ourselves, and so from the 90s. I mean, for myself, I remember going out on that first tour and we had no sales numbers had come in, and we were going out like the week before the album was even coming out. We had no idea if anybody was going to show up or not, because we weren't big enough to sell advance tickets no matter anywhere we were. Nowadays, anybody can look at Facebook and see how many likes they've been getting for weeks and weeks and weeks, or shares on Twitter or Instagram and everything else. Randy, how important has social media gotten to you and your clients in measuring the potential successes of your releases and album cycles?
I mean, ultimately, it's the most important thing. No question about it. Social media is where I would say probably like 90+% of all the commerce comes from. It's how we're educating fans. Even if you have a song, I primarily am managing stuff right now that's rock radio bands. So if you're rock radio and have a top 10 song, social media is still more important than that top 10 song at rock radio, just to kind of give a vision to a young artist who thinks being on the radio is the end all be all. Social media is still going to be your primary piece. And then from there, it's just which platform is driving the most. And, one of the things I always tell younger artists is have some kind of presence on every platform, but just use what speaks to you and speaks to your fans, because not every platform is going to be right for every artist. Some artists, Pinterest may even still be right for. Not many, but some may. And you shouldn't rule out any type of platform that may be right for you. You may be, you may be a TikToker or even Twitch. Like there's so many different routes to go that, you shouldn't just focus on one social media platform. It needs to be where your right fan base is and focus on that.
Mike, I'd seen a thread on Twitter just the other day where they were, I think it was Blasco was asking, do you care to get signed? And everybody's like, oh no, I never want to be signed because they just never been offered anything. But the thing to me that like I read that and I go, wow, if there's one thing that labels and other industry stalwarts, I guess I don't know how else to put it, that the unfair advantage you get at this point are the best practices that Bill is talking about that come from learning from the data, from releasing stuff over and over and over again. Is that the big advantage now that you get from signing to a big booking agency, a big record label, and so on and so forth?
It's one of them for sure. I mean, leverage is a component, but if we're talking specifically about the record labels, of course. I mean, part of it is they've built up their own social media platforms to give you a leg up by just launching whatever it is that you're doing. But of course, I mean, part of what made us even remotely valuable with this coaching platform was, my 10 plus years of experience of managing tons and tons and tons of super small baby bands, working with all of the relevant labels, within the genres that I kind of specialize in, and taking those points from each and every one. And throughout that entire time, I would take, oh, this label is doing this. Let me take it over to this other label and see if it makes a difference with the artists that we're working there. So, but again, as Bill said, I mean, I just about to pick up an artist who has had monumental success online on their own. And these guys are data nerds. They're hungry for it. They're excited about it. They're even digging in and saying, okay, what is it about this song that's reacting differently than others? Is it the beats per minute? Is it the chorus came in at a certain time? Some of the stuff that we've all kind of trained ourselves to think, but they're actually looking at it within the parameters of what data is available. I mean, this is kind of what you put in is what you're going to get out. One of the reasons I asked Randy if he kind of could estimate that discrepancy is, I feel like with what I'm doing with data right now with, Ice Night Kills is all icing on the cake, right? Like we already have a pretty great business, and now we're going in and honing in on data to see how much of a difference it can make. right? And in a short amount of time, we really started to dig in during quarantine. We're 3 months in. I'm seeing a spike. I'm curious to see how far that can go. And I really love what Vivian said. I hadn't even really come at the data with how do I get that, bridge that gap that she was talking about between whatever, what somebody's willing to spend. I hadn't even really thought of it in that capacity until this panel. So thanks for that.
Ryan, there's a few things I would love to ask you, but we're running short on time. But like, is there, when Mike talks about like using data to what ultimately affects even the creative process for your for artists, is that something that artists should be doing more of, or is that like sacrosanct? You just don't go there?
I would say it varies artist to artist in terms of what they're comfortable with and what they feel like is part of their expression. I mean, the punk rock part of me that I think probably all of us on here share to some extent thinks that's anathema. But at the same time, one could certainly argue that it's not any better or worse than looking at any other kind of metric. So, it would be difficult without taking a fan poll or something to really determine those kind of specifics. I think about what's connecting on a creative way. I still think there's still some magic to that and some chance and different stars aligning. I mean, you mentioned Blasco a moment ago. I actually did hour and 40-minute long Zoom with him today for something different. And we were talking about a band that he was in the early 90s that had a development demo deal with A&M and then ended up signing to Elektra and, spent $350,000 making a record and had the same managers as Pantera and White Zombie and big producers. And, the record came out and flopped and they were dropped. And the story of so many bands from the 70s, 80s, 90s. And, in those instances, for the metrics and the sort of juice that you could get around a record or an artist, there were so many examples like that where they had everything. They had everything in place in terms of the right label, the right team, the right marketing, the right producer, the right songs. And then sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I think all of us, given this is obviously a data-centric conversation, and maybe it's awkward to bring this up, but we should all probably, myself included, remember that some of it's just, it's out of our control and it is intangible. And sometimes something works despite itself,